Arizona wakes before the sun rises. Even in the early morning darkness, heat rests on the pavement like an invisible weight, thick, unmoving, merciless. In the silence before dawn, the city feels suspended between stillness and exhaustion. Phoenix, Tucson, Mesa, Flagstaff, every place carries the same quiet tension. Another day of survival is about to begin. On the edges of vacant lots, under highway overpasses, in dusty alleys, and in makeshift encampments stitched together from tarps and donated blankets, thousands of people rise with the desert heat. They pull themselves out of tents, cars, shaded corners, out of whatever shelter they found the night before. Some stretch their backs slowly after a night on the hard ground. Others pack up quickly before the sun climbs higher. A few sit silently, watching the horizon, letting the early air, still bearable, touch their skin. Each morning is a reminder. The heat will return, and it will not negotiate. For many residents, summer in Arizona is an inconvenience, something managed with air conditioning, ice drinks, and weekend trips to the mountains. But for people without homes, summer is a different season entirely. It becomes an adversary, an obstacle, and sometimes a threat. When temperatures reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 115 degrees Fahrenheit, or even higher, the world becomes a furnace. Metal benches burn, pavement scorches, shade becomes currency, water becomes life. If a documentary about the homeless begins here, on an ordinary morning in Phoenix, it should not start with voices explaining statistics or charts showing trends. It should start with breath, with heat, with the quiet determination of someone who survived another night. This essay follows that intention. It does not present homelessness as numbers or problems or policy debates. It presents it as life, human life, experienced moment to moment. It invites viewers and readers to step closer, to listen more carefully, and to recognize that behind every tent, every cardboard sign, every tired expression is a person who once had a door, a bed, a dream, a set of keys in their pocket. If a documentary about the homeless is meant to awaken conscience, it begins with something simple: noticing. And once we notice, we cannot unsee. A divide etched in heat. The streets of Arizona hold two realities at the same time. On one side are the neighborhoods with green lawns, tall fences, and sparkling blue pools. On the other side are streets where shade is created by the overpass and where water is carried in repurposed jugs. The physical distance between these two worlds is small, sometimes just a sidewalk, but the lived distance is immeasurable. People in stable homes turn the thermostat down a few degrees and wait out the afternoon heat. People without homes search desperately for shelter before it becomes dangerous. In the hottest days, the simple act of staying cool becomes a fight that repeats every 24 hours. The divide is not only about temperature or comfort, it is about visibility. For many residents, people experiencing homelessness appear like silhouettes, encountered briefly at intersections or seen from a passing car. But for those living the experience, invisibility cuts deeper than discomfort. Many say the hardest part is not the hunger, not the heat, not the exhaustion. It is the feeling that their presence no longer matters. That's the part that gets to your heart, one man once said in an interview. Not being seen, not being human to someone. A documentary about the homeless often captures these moments. The quiet interactions, the things people say when the microphone is off, the emotion in their voices when they feel understood, even for a moment. In Arizona, the divide also shows up through the way help is distributed. Residents in wealthier communities can call for assistance and receive it quickly. Meanwhile, when someone without shelter asks for help, the responses are slower, more complicated, and sometimes unavailable. It is not always intentional, but the impact is real. Heat waves strike everyone, but not everyone has the same level of protection. The scorching sun becomes a mirror reflecting a larger truth. The systems designed to protect people often work better for those already protected. And so the divide deepens, not because people choose for it to deepen, but because it is allowed to. The burden of surviving in plain sight. Walking through downtown Phoenix on a summer afternoon is like entering a giant oven. The heat radiates from every direction. The asphalt emits waves that distort the air. Metal railings feel hot enough to burn. In these conditions, survival becomes a full-time job. People without homes carry backpacks filled with necessities, bottles of water, hats, small towels, handwritten notes, medications. Some push grocery carts, holding everything they own. Others keep their possessions in storage units they visit once or twice a week. A few individuals keep only what they can carry in their hands. There is no room for excess. Every item has a purpose. The day starts with finding shade. Trees, bus stops, the sides of buildings, anything that casts a shadow becomes an essential resource. People gather near cooling centers when they open, but supplies are limited, space is limited, and hours are limited. In interviews filmed for a documentary about the homeless, several people describe their daily routines with heartbreaking clarity. Wake up before sunrise, pack everything in case we're told to move, find shade, find water, rest when possible, look for work if I have the energy, check on neighbors, try to make it through. This rhythm is not laziness, as stereotypes often claim. It is survival in one of the most unforgiving climates in the country. Each step is strategic. Each decision is made under pressure. Then there's the emotional burden, carrying hope while navigating uncertainty. Many hide their pain behind jokes or stories. Others remain quiet and observe the world around them. But nearly all share one thing: the desire to be treated with dignity. Too often, people walk past them without making eye contact. Cars accelerate quickly when someone approaches an intersection holding a sign. Conversations shift uncomfortably when homelessness is mentioned. And yet, in these moments of avoidance, the human heart still beats. The desire for connection remains. If the purpose of a documentary about the homeless is to awaken empathy, it must reveal this truth. Homelessness is not isolation by choice. It is isolation enforced by circumstance and reinforced by misunderstanding. Stories behind the struggle. Behind every face is a story, and behind every story is a turning point, sometimes a single moment, sometimes a chain of events that unfolds over years, sometimes a lifetime of quiet battles. These are not isolated experiences. They echo the lives of countless people across Arizona. For many teens aging out of the foster system, turning 18 feels less like freedom and more like being dropped into adulthood without a net. Some land on their feet with jobs or housing, but many do not. A young man in Tucson captured it with heartbreaking simplicity. One day I had rules. The next day, I had nothing. Within months, he went from sleeping behind a laundromat to living in a tent near downtown. His experience is a reminder that the transition from foster care to independence can be abrupt, unsupported, and unforgiving. For seniors living on fixed incomes, rising rent can be a slow but unstoppable force. People who lived independently for decades suddenly find themselves unable to keep up as housing costs grow faster than their monthly checks. Some move into extended stay motels until the funds run out. Others stay with friends until they feel they're burdening them. Eventually, many have nowhere left to go. At an outreach event, an elderly woman quietly confessed, "I'm more afraid of being forgotten than anything else," revealing a fear shared by many older adults who slip through the cracks. Despite persistent stereotypes, many people experiencing homelessness are employed, working long hours in restaurants, office buildings, warehouses, kitchens, and delivery routes. But wages simply cannot keep pace with the cost of living. In most Arizona counties, even a full-time minimum wage worker cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment. One man put it plainly, "I work every day, but I still sleep outside. I don't know what more I can do." There is no anger in his voice, only a deep, bone-tired weariness born from fighting a battle he feels he cannot win. Each of these stories reveals a different face of the same crisis. Together, they show that homelessness is rarely the result of a single failure, but rather the collision of systemic pressures, personal challenges, and a society that too often looks away, a crisis years in the making. Homelessness is never an overnight disaster. It is a slow accumulation of pressures, setbacks, and systemic failures. It grows layer by layer, fueled by economic strain, surging housing costs, wages that refuse to rise, and the gradual erosion of social safety nets meant to protect the most vulnerable. In Arizona, this crisis didn't simply emerge, it intensified with alarming speed. Rents climbed far beyond what working families could afford. New construction focused almost exclusively on luxury apartments and high-end developments, leaving those in need of modest housing with fewer and fewer options. Affordable housing projects lagged hopelessly behind the state's explosive population growth, and evictions began to climb as landlords capitalized on a tightening market. Meanwhile, income remained stagnant, unable to keep pace with the relentless rise of inflation. The outcome was tragically predictable. People who had once been just barely managing, those living paycheck to paycheck, families juggling bills, individuals working long hours, found themselves suddenly and violently pushed out of stability. And when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, every existing problem deepened. Job losses spread across industries. Medical expenses mounted. Stress and uncertainty seeped into every household. Temporary protections offered brief relief, but once they expired, countless people slipped through the cracks. Documentaries about homelessness are often accused of exaggeration, of dramatizing hardship for emotional effect. But the truth is even harsher than what any camera can capture. When the cost of living rises faster than wages, when survival becomes a race that ordinary people cannot win, thousands are pushed to the brink. Some manage to cling on. Others, through no fault of their own, eventually fall. Heat as an unseen enemy. To understand homelessness in Arizona, you must first understand the heat, a force so relentless and unforgiving that it becomes a threat as real as hunger or violence. This is not the mild warmth imagined by those unfamiliar with the desert. It is a heat that scorches, overwhelms, and endangers. Each summer, temperatures climb past 110 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there for weeks. Heat alerts become routine, almost expected. Asphalt turns into a searing surface that can reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit, capable of burning skin within seconds. Metal benches, railings, and shopping carts become too hot to touch. Dehydration settles in quickly, especially for those walking long distances or carrying every possession they own. People often think winter cold is the greatest danger for those without shelter. But in Arizona, the heat is equally lethal. It dominates every hour of the day, pressing down on the body like a physical weight. Even after sunset, the air remains heavy and scorching, often staying above 100 degrees Fahrenheit deep into the night. There is no relief, only a slight dimming of the intensity. Cooling centers offer temporary refuge, but they cannot accommodate everyone. Shade structures help, but many neighborhoods and open areas have none. Water distribution events save lives, yet supplies disappear faster than volunteers can replenish them. In the face of these limited resources, people improvise in whatever ways they can, soaking shirts to cool their skin, keeping blankets wet to reduce body temperature, standing near public fountains for fleeting relief, covering their heads with scarves or towels, and sharing water with friends even when they themselves have barely enough. But these survival strategies only delay the inevitable exhaustion. The heat shapes decisions: when to walk, where to rest, how far one can travel. It dictates routines, saps strength, and wears down the body day after day. For those without shelter, Arizona's heat becomes more than weather. It becomes an adversary, an invisible enemy, and a daily test of endurance that never truly ends. Light in dark moments. Despite the heat, the hardship, and the feeling of being unseen, there are moments of remarkable tenderness, small acts of empathy that flicker like light in overwhelming darkness. These moments do not erase the crisis, but they remind us that even in the harshest conditions, humanity survives. A volunteer kneels down, offering cold water with both hands as if handing someone a lifeline. A man who has almost nothing shares his last granola bar with a neighbor who has even less. A woman without shelter uses her own body to shield another from the brutal afternoon sun. Outreach workers call people by name, restoring dignity through something as simple as recognition, showing that someone remembers them, someone sees them. Strangers stop to offer shoes, tents, hats, or a few quiet words of encouragement that can feel heavier than any donation. These gestures cannot solve homelessness, but they matter in ways statistics can never measure. They preserve the humanity that constant struggle tries to erode. They remind people that they are not forgotten, that kindness still exists, that connection can show up in the unlikeliest of places. Within encampments, a quiet, improvised community often emerges. People checking on one another during dangerous heat waves, sharing water, trading food, watching each other's belongings, offering protection during the night. Many who experience homelessness display extraordinary compassion, often giving more than they receive. If a documentary hopes to inspire, it must show these moments, not to hide the suffering, but to illuminate the resilience. These are the fragments of hope that reveal strength, solidarity, and the unwavering human capacity to care, even when life offers so little in return. Systems that struggle to keep up. Arizona's support network is carried by people with enormous dedication. Social workers, outreach teams, clinic staff, volunteers, case managers, and medical professionals who show up every day determined to make a difference. They give their time, their patience, and often their emotional strength to support those in crisis. But compassion alone cannot overcome the sheer scale of need. Shelters reach capacity night after night, turning away people who have nowhere else to go. Medical clinics, already stretched thin, struggle to handle the influx of patients facing untreated wounds, chronic illnesses, heat-related injuries, and mental health crises. Affordable housing lists stretch for months or even years, leaving families trapped in limbo. Outreach teams are responsible for covering vast geographic areas, driving miles across desert landscapes to find individuals who need help. Mental health services, critical for so many, are underfunded and overwhelmed, unable to meet the rising demand. Even the most committed workers cannot compensate for systems pushed beyond their limits. The reality is clear: structural change is not optional. Arizona needs stronger policies, increased funding, realistic priorities, and long-term solutions that address the crisis at its roots rather than merely reacting to its consequences. A documentary about homelessness can shine a light on these limitations, not to criticize the people doing their best within a broken framework, but to show how urgently we need a system that matches the scale of the problem. Only then can meaningful, lasting solutions begin to take shape. Housing, the foundation of stability. Housing is far more than a roof above someone's head. It is the anchor that holds a life together. It provides stability, the sense that tomorrow will not be swept away. It offers safety from the elements and from harm. It grants privacy, a space where a person can breathe without fear. It allows rest, the kind that restores the body and the mind. It protects dignity, giving people the freedom to exist without constant exposure. Most importantly, it serves as the essential starting point for rebuilding a life. Arizona's housing market has shifted dramatically in recent years, and not in favor of those with limited incomes. Prices surged, wages stagnated, the gap widened until thousands could no longer keep pace. The outcome was inevitable. Many people were pushed out of the market and left behind. Yet real solutions exist. Communities across the state and the nation have experimented with innovative approaches, converting old motels into shelters or long-term apartments, building tiny home villages that offer privacy and stability, expanding rental assistance programs to prevent evictions, accelerating the construction of affordable housing, and creating supportive housing communities with on-site services that help residents navigate mental health, employment, and medical challenges. These strategies have shown promising results, proving that progress is possible. But to truly confront the scale of the crisis, these solutions must grow, not as scattered pilot programs, but as coordinated, statewide efforts that match the magnitude of the need. Housing is the foundation of stability, and without expanding that foundation, every other intervention can only go so far. Hope rising from the heat. Despite everything, the scorching summers, the strained systems, the overwhelming need, hope continues to rise in Arizona. It appears in the places where communities open cooling centers so people can escape deadly temperatures. It shows up in volunteers who deliver water by the truckload, often driving for hours to reach remote encampments. It grows in organizations working tirelessly to build emergency housing, transforming empty lots and unused buildings into places of refuge. It lives in small groups gathering donations, neighborhoods pushing for real policy change, and individuals who simply look out for one another. Change never arrives in a single sweeping moment. It begins quietly, with awareness, with willingness, with the recognition that another person's suffering is not inevitable. It starts when someone chooses to care. A documentary about homelessness is not designed to drain hope from viewers. It is meant to show that transformation is possible. Solutions exist. Progress is real. And in Arizona, many people are already choosing to be part of that change. Final reflection, humanity at the center. This essay began with heat, relentless, punishing, and unyielding. But beneath that scorching weight lies something far stronger, humanity. It is found in the resilience of people enduring challenges most could not imagine, in the quiet determination of those who cling to hope, even when exhaustion settles into their bones, in the moments when individuals protect one another simply because no one else will. It lives in gestures so small they could be overlooked, yet so meaningful they keep faith alive. Homelessness is not a label, nor a moral failing, nor an identity someone chooses. It is a circumstance, fragile, unpredictable, and often shaped by forces far beyond any individual's control. Anyone can be pushed into crisis through a chain of events that spirals faster than they can respond. A documentary about homelessness concludes with a message, not of despair, but of connection, not of pity, but of understanding, not of blame, but of collective responsibility. Such a story does not demand viewers to solve every problem. It simply asks them to look and to truly see. Because once we see, we begin to feel. Once we feel, we begin to understand. And once we understand, we begin to act. An action, even the smallest, quietest act, has the power to change someone's life.